Good evening. Take a deep breath. Let the weight of the day begin to drift away. You've done enough. There is nothing more you need to do right now except settle in. Let your body grow still and your thoughts soften into quiet. Tonight, we are going to visit a world of moonlit marble and desert winds, of rustling linen and distant flutes, a world where a queen once walked barefoot through palace gardens, her mind carrying languages, alliances, and ancient dreams. Her name was Cleopatra. You've heard it before, perhaps in passing, or from stories filled with drama and intrigue. But tonight, we will leave behind the noise. We will not chase the legends, the loves, or the wars. Instead, we will follow Cleopatra's life as it truly unfolded, slowly, gently. We'll begin in her quiet routines, the soft folds of her robe, the scent of oils in the air. Then we'll follow her life's winding journey from Alexandria's royal halls to the edges of empire. Along the way, we'll pause to consider a curious detail, a mystery, a moment of thought that lingers across centuries. And then we'll look outward to the world that surrounded her, the people who walked the same streets, the silence of temple courtyards, the rhythm of a city balanced between gods and scholars, Nile and sea. So, make yourself comfortable. Allow the centuries to fade away, and let us begin.
Imagine a room where the morning light is soft and golden, filtering through high, narrow windows carved into stone. The air is warm, but not yet hot. The hush of dawn still lingers over the city of Alexandria. Here, in the palace, a place of quiet columns and open courtyards, Cleopatra begins her day. Her room is large, but not extravagant. The floors are cool, polished limestone, the walls adorned with delicate paintings of lotuses and stars. A gentle breeze moves through linen curtains, carrying the faintest scent of myrrh, of desert dust, and the sea. She rises slowly, not rushed, not summoned, for in these early hours time moves differently. She slips into a robe of soft white linen woven so finely that it feels almost weightless, tied with a simple sash of dyed wool, deep blue or ochre. Her hair is long and dark, braided neatly by handmaidens who work in silence. Oil of cedar wood and almond is smoothed along her temples. A circlet of thin gold may rest lightly across her brow, not as a crown, but as a gesture of presence, a readiness. Before speaking, she rinses her hands in rose water. The basin is stone, the vessel is bronze. Water, even here in the palace, is never wasted. It is drawn carefully from cool cisterns, carried in jars that catch the sun. She eats very little in the morning, a few dates, perhaps a piece of bread made from barley, softened with honey, a sip of wine diluted with water. There is quiet all around her, the hush of servants moving along smooth floors, the faint clatter of papyrus scrolls being sorted in the next room, and beyond the palace, the sounds of Alexandria waking up, carts rolling, birds calling, the splash of oars against the harbor's edge. If she walks through the garden, she does so slowly. Cypress trees rise tall around her. The paths are paved with crushed shells and powdered stone. White ibises stand in stillness at the edge of a pond. She may pause before a statue of Isis, her ancestor goddess, or touch a carved glyph for protection before entering a study room. These are private rituals, quiet rhythms. They are not for show. And here in the early light, before letters arrive, before envoys are received, Cleopatra is simply herself, a young woman, a scholar, a queen in preparation. The silk of her sandals whispering over stone, the morning air filled with sunlight and stillness, the rhythm of her life, beginning again.
Let us remain in the calm. Let the stillness of morning follow us now, as we quietly begin the long walk of her life. A life not only of moments, but of motion, from one chamber to the next, from learning to ruling, from the Nile to Rome and back again. Cleopatra VII Philopator was born in 69 BCE into the royal Ptolemaic dynasty, a line of rulers descended not from Egypt itself, but from Greece, from Macedon. Her ancestor had been a general under Alexander the Great, and for generations her family ruled Egypt as Greek-speaking kings and queens. But Cleopatra was different. She would become the first of her line in centuries to learn the Egyptian language, and not only that, she spoke many more. 9 languages, it said, perhaps more. She was fluent in Greek and Egyptian, but also Aramaic, Hebrew, Latin, and tongues of the African and Arabian coasts. Her education was rigorous. She read philosophy, astronomy, mathematics, and medicine. She studied rhetoric, law, and the divine texts of Egyptian priests. Her teachers may have come from the great library of Alexandria itself, that dreamlike institution where scrolls whispered the secrets of thousands of years. But Cleopatra was not only a student, she was a daughter of power, and power in Egypt meant instability. By the time she was 14 or 15, she was already being prepared for rule. In 51 BCE, her father, Ptolemy XII, died, and she, still a teenager, was crowned co-ruler alongside her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII. Their reign was not peaceful. Egypt was strained by famine, by Roman debts, by internal court factions. Within just a few years, Cleopatra was driven into exile, her name erased from coins and decrees. But she did not disappear. In exile, she gathered support, quietly, carefully. She watched, waited. And then something unexpected. Julius Caesar arrived in Alexandria, chasing a rival from Rome. Cleopatra saw her opportunity and entered the palace once more, famously not with guards or trumpets, but perhaps in a roll of cloth carried through the gates by night. That story may be more legend than fact, but the image endures, of a young queen returning not with force, but with presence. Caesar, captivated by her intellect and poise, helped restore her to the throne. And Cleopatra ruled, truly ruled. Over the next decade, she led Egypt through drought and renewal. She traveled with Caesar to Rome. She governed a complex kingdom, managing grain, trade, and religion, balancing Greek tradition and Egyptian belief with skill. After Caesar's death, she allied herself with another Roman, Mark Antony, a partnership both political and personal. Together, they formed a power strong enough to rival Rome itself. They had children, held court in Alexandria, and dreamed, perhaps, of a new empire. But the tides of history moved against them. Rome, under Octavian, the future Augustus, turned against them. In a final confrontation, Antony's fleet was defeated at the Battle of Actium. And so, in the quiet of her final days, Cleopatra returned to her palace and prepared herself for death. She did not flee. She did not beg. She simply withdrew. It is said she took her life with poison or a snake,
but the truth is uncertain. What is known is that she died with ceremony, as a queen, and with her ended not just a dynasty, but an entire chapter of ancient Egypt's story. After her death, Egypt became a Roman province, the age of pharaohs, of queens who read scrolls by lamplight, slipped gently into silence. And yet Cleopatra's name remains, whispered still, not for her tragedies, but for her mind, her presence, her command of ancient rhythms. A queen who understood the past and dared to shape the future.
Now, let us slow even further. The events of Cleopatra's life, the dates, the wars, the alliances, these are the stones of the path she walked. But beneath the stones is something softer, a layer of thought and silence, a place where mystery lingers. Tonight, we linger there, too. Among the many puzzles that surround Cleopatra, not just the queen, but the woman, perhaps the most curious is this. What did Cleopatra believe? Not about politics or power, but about life, about death, about the soul. She was a ruler between worlds, Greek by ancestry, Egyptian by realm, living in an age when the old gods of Nile and sky still filled temples with incense, even as Roman philosophy questioned fate, duty, and the stars. And Cleopatra, immersed in all of it, would have carried those thoughts within her. She was not merely a figure of the court, but a reader of sacred texts. She would have known the Book of the Dead, or rather the Book of Coming Forth by Day, the ancient Egyptian guide to the afterlife. It is said that upon death the soul must pass through gates, recite spells, and face judgment before the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of balance, truth, and harmony. Did Cleopatra believe in those spells? Did she prepare her body with these rites in mind? Or did she turn instead to the Stoics of Greece, who taught that reason was the path to virtue, and that peace lay in accepting what the universe allows? We do not know, but we can imagine that in the quiet of night, in the hush of her study, when the palace slept, Cleopatra might have unrolled an ancient scroll and read words written 1,000 years before her birth. She might have traced the ink with careful fingers, read aloud the names of gods no longer spoken in Rome. Or she might have sat, quietly, under a night sky, not seeking answers, but simply being. There is also a curious silence in the records. Though her image appears on coins, though Roman historians wrote of her appearance, her voice, her manner, Cleopatra left behind no writings of her own that we possess, no letters, no memoir, no proclamation in her own voice alone. Yet there are whispers. Plutarch, writing many years later, said that it was not her beauty that captivated those around her, but the sound of her voice, the charm of her speech, the rhythm of her conversation. Imagine it now, low, measured, filled with clarity and presence. In a world ruled by violence, she ruled with speech, with knowledge, with listening. And this, too, is her mystery, that for all the legends, The true heart of Cleopatra may live not in any single moment, but in the space between them, in the echo of her footsteps, the weight of her gaze, and the wisdom of a queen who knew how to hold silence and how to fill it.
Now let us step back. Step softly, like crossing a marble floor in the early hours, and look not only at Cleopatra, but at the world that surrounded her, a world that breathed beside her with its own rhythm, its own life. The Egypt of Cleopatra was already ancient, older than Rome, older than Greece. It was a land of pyramids that were, by her time, already over 2,000 years old. And yet, it still thrived, still pulsed with rituals and seasons, tied to the slow rise and fall of the Nile. Each year, the river would swell with floodwaters from deep within Africa, leaving behind rich black silt, dark soil so fertile it was called the gift of the Nile. The people, farmers, artisans, priests, lived by that rhythm. They planted when the waters receded. They harvested when the stalks turned gold. In towns and villages, the pace was slow, purposeful. Men carved stone and baked bread. Women wove flax and ground grain by hand, using millstones that turned with a gentle scrape. Children played near irrigation canals, their feet coated in warm earth. Religion flowed through all things. Each town had a patron god. Each temple was a small world maintained by priests who performed the same prayers every morning, bathing statues, lighting incense, whispering hymns in forgotten dialects. And above them all, the great temples stood: Luxor, Edfu, Dundera. Their columns soared, covered in carvings that spiraled upward like prayers in stone. In Alexandria, the capital, the world was different. A city of learning, of trade, of converging cultures. Greek-speaking nobles walked beside Egyptian merchants. Jews, Syrians, Ethiopians, all mingled in the city's vast markets and shaded courtyards. There was noise, yes, the murmur of debate in the gymnasium, the cry of sellers at the harbor, but also quiet places. The library, though diminished in her time, still held scholars. The great Pharos lighthouse still shone across the sea, a beacon of presence, of permanence. And though Rome's shadow loomed larger every year, Egypt still remembered itself, its traditions, its gods, its rituals of preparation and preservation. They lived on in festivals and funerary rites, in songs sung at dawn, and names whispered in tombs. To walk through Cleopatra's world was to move through layers. The newest layer was Greek, with its marble sculptures and scrolls of Plato. Beneath it, Egyptian, gods with falcon heads and lotus crowns. And beneath that, something deeper still. A sense of time that curved like the river, endless, slow, circular. In such a world, a queen was never only a ruler. She was a symbol, a priestess, a daughter of gods. And though her palace no longer stands, though her tomb has never been found, the world she lived in, of light, stone, water, and word, still speaks softly across time. Now you've walked with Cleopatra. You've heard the soft sounds of her mourning, felt the hush of palace gardens, followed the turning pages of her life, not in haste, but in quiet curiosity. And perhaps what lingers most is not her power, but her presence. The way she lived between worlds, the way she thought, listened, read, and ruled. She lived in a time of tension, of fading ages and rising empires, but still she rose each morning, tied the sash of her robe, stepped softly across stone, and carried her knowledge like a flame. As you rest now, let her story drift through your thoughts, not as a tale of conquest, but as a gentle meditation on time, on identity, on the quiet strength of intellect. Sleep, if it comes, may find you among scrolls and shadows, walking slowly along the banks of the Nile, or listening to distant flutes in a city of marble and light. The night is deep, the world is quiet, and history, like the river, flows gently on. Good night.